Tutankhamun's mask is an icon. And I think part of it is because it is made of solid gold, and a lot of people get wowed.
They told the world the mask was silent, perfect, untouchable. But when a classified imaging system was aimed at the most iconic face of ancient Egypt, something answered back. Not with words, not with symbols, but with patterns that should not exist. The first technician froze. The second shut the system down. The third reportedly said only one thing before leaving the room. This was never meant to be seen. For decades, Egyptology claimed the golden mask was merely ceremonial, a masterpiece of craftsmanship meant to guide a boy king into the afterlife. Yet buried within the layers of gold and glass, the scan revealed internal anomalies that do not align with known burial practices. These were not cracks, not repairs, not mistakes. The signal response suggested deliberate structuring, hidden beneath millimeters of gold, arranged with precision that modern instruments struggle to map. Whispers began immediately. Senior researchers were removed from the project. Data access logs were wiped. A previously unknown review committee took control of the findings within hours. Publicly, nothing happened. Privately, everything shifted. Because the imaging did not just reflect the surface, it returned echoes as if the mask was built to interact with something unseen. The scan that broke the silence. The technology was described as quantum imaging, but not in the way textbooks explain it. This system did not rely on light alone. It measured probability disturbances, mapping how matter behaves when observed at extreme resolution. When the mask was scanned, the readings formed repeating geometries embedded inside the faceplate. Perfect alignments. Intentional voids. Structures that mirror mathematical ratios not formally documented until thousands of years later. One pattern appeared again and again. Centered behind the forehead. Not decorative. Not structural. Purposeful. The imaging suggested a layered chamber no thicker than a coin, sealed within the gold itself. No tool marks. No access points. As if it was never meant to be opened, only activated. Those who reviewed the raw data reportedly reacted with disbelief. Some called it contamination, others called it equipment failure. But the system was recalibrated 3 times, using separate reference materials. Each time, the same result appeared, a hidden configuration, responding to the scan as if it recognized the method being used. That was when the term resonance started circulating in internal notes. The mask was not passive, it was responding. What they tried to bury. According to leaked summaries, the most disturbing result came last. When the imaging frequency shifted, the internal geometry appeared to change, not physically but statistically. The probabilities moved, the structure adapted. This should be impossible for an inanimate object. Yet the data suggested interaction, as though the mask was designed with an awareness of observation itself. At that point, the project was shut down. The official reasons cited funding realignment. But several involved researchers vanished from academic circulation. Papers were pulled before peer review. One unnamed analyst allegedly warned that the mask was never just a funerary object, but a device tied to identity, transformation, and control beyond death. The implication was clear and deeply unsettling. If the mask was engineered to respond to advanced observation, then its creators understood principles humanity claims to have discovered only recently. And if that knowledge existed, preserved in plain sight for centuries, then the accepted timeline of human capability collapses. The mask still sits behind glass, unchanged to the public eye. But behind closed doors, the question remains unresolved. Was this artifact meant to honor a king, or to preserve something else entirely? And if the scan was only the beginning, what happens when they try again? Internal sources described emergency meetings, where language shifted from academic to defensive. Words like artifact and ritual were replaced with containment and risk. One transcript fragment referenced a protocol usually reserved for unstable materials, despite the object being sealed and motionless. The fear was not that it would break, but that it had already done what it was designed to do. The most alarming theory suggested the mask functioned as a stabilizer, preserving more than physical remains. The geometry aligned with ancient diagrams, previously dismissed as symbolic. Now they appeared instructional. Not art, but engineering disguised as myth. The gold was not chosen for beauty alone, but for conductivity at specific frequencies that modern labs rarely test. When a secondary scan was proposed using a different observation method, approval was denied within minutes. The order did not come from museum authorities. It came from an external body whose name was redacted in every document. One researcher reportedly asked why such oversight was necessary. The response was brief: because this changes everything. Since then, subtle alterations have been noted in how the mask is described publicly. Language softened, details removed, emphasis shifted back to craftsmanship and tradition. Yet those who have seen the data insist the truth cannot be unlearned. The patterns remain, the responses were recorded, and the question no one dares ask out loud continues to echo through closed halls. If the mask reacts to observation, what does it do when no one is watching? And if ancient builders encoded something meant to endure beyond time, who was it really meant for? The scan ended, but the consequences did not. There is one final detail rarely mentioned. During the initial scan, background sensors recorded a brief spike unrelated to the mask itself. Environmental readings shifted for less than a second, then normalized. No explanation was logged, no follow-up authorized. Some believe it was interference, others believe it was acknowledgement. Because if the mask was built to respond, then observation was never a one-way act. Something looked back, however briefly, and the system noticed. That moment was removed from the official dataset, flagged as noise, but those present say the room went silent. Not metaphorically. The ambient hum dropped, as if sound itself hesitated. Then everything returned to normal, except the people. Several refused to continue working near the artifact. One reportedly said the mask was not ancient history, but unfinished business. Since that day, access has tightened, questions have multiplied, and certainty has vanished. What was supposed to confirm the past instead destabilized it. And if even a fraction of the suppressed data is accurate, then the mask is not a relic. It is a message, still active, waiting. Waiting for the right eyes, the right tools, and the right moment. Because some things are hidden not to be lost, but to be found when the world is capable of understanding them. The silence after the shutdown was not accidental. It was enforced. Access cards were revoked, archives locked, and the raw imaging files segmented into fragments no single person could view in full. Officially, the scan never produced meaningful results. Unofficially, internal chatter suggested panic. Not confusion. Panic. Because what emerged next did not fit even the most generous reinterpretation of ancient symbolism. Several analysts noticed that the internal geometries matched no known artistic tradition. They were not Egyptian. They were not foreign. They were functional. When overlaid with modern field equations, the shapes aligned disturbingly well. Not perfectly, but close enough to suggest intention. Close enough to suggest design. This was not decoration hidden inside gold. This was architecture. Patterns that should not exist. The most troubling discovery involved alignment. The hidden structures inside the mask were oriented not to the face, but to an external reference point. When researchers adjusted the scan model to account for Earth's axial shift over millennia, the orientation locked into place. The geometry pointed somewhere specific, using a reference frame that only works if you understand planetary movement across deep time. That alone caused alarm. But then came the secondary correlation. The same internal ratios appeared in fragments of temple layouts scattered across the Nile Valley, sites never thought to be connected. Structures separated by hundreds of miles suddenly snapped into coherence when the mask's geometry was used as a key. It was as if the artifact was a central node, a master template from which other constructions derived. This reframed everything. The mask was no longer an isolated masterpiece, it was part of a system. According to suppressed briefings, one simulation attempted to model how the internal chamber would behave if exposed to sustained observation at higher resolution. The result was immediate instability in the probability field, not physical damage. Conceptual distortion. The system began returning inconsistent outcomes, as if the object resisted being fully defined. One scientist reportedly compared it to trying to pin down smoke with a ruler. The more precisely they observed, the less stable the data became. This behavior triggered a security escalation, because in controlled environments, only one class of phenomena behaves this way. Systems designed to avoid complete disclosure. Why the narrative changed overnight? Shortly after these findings circulated, a coordinated shift occurred. Museum placards were revised, academic descriptions simplified, media references quietly redirected. The mask was rebranded as a symbol of tradition, faith, and artistry. No mention of anomalies, no mention of scans, no mention of internal structures. Behind the scenes, a new hypothesis took hold. The mask was not meant to be understood in isolation. It was meant to be worn. Not physically, but functionally. The internal configuration aligned with cranial measurements far too precisely to ignore. The chamber behind the forehead matched regions associated with perception, identity, and decision-making. This was not coincidence, it was placement. If activated, the mask would not store information. It would interface. That possibility triggered an immediate halt to further testing. Because if the mask was designed to interact with consciousness, then scanning it was not a neutral act, it was engagement. And the system had already responded once. Some internal notes hinted at an even darker implication. The boy king may not have been the creator's intended user, he may have been the container, a placeholder. The mask's design suggested adaptability, as if it could attune to whoever met specific criteria. Bloodline, training, or something else entirely. This reframed the burial ritual. The gold, the precision, the secrecy. It was not about honoring the dead. It was about sealing a function. Preserving access. Ensuring continuity across generations without exposing the mechanism. One leaked memo referenced a phrase translated loosely as the face that completes the circuit. This phrase does not appear in any public translation. It was dismissed historically as metaphor. After the scan, it was reclassified as technical language. The implications spiraled outward. If the mask was one interface, others might exist. Lost, destroyed, or misidentified as ceremonial art. The ancient world may have operated on principles intentionally obscured by ritual language, disguising engineering as myth to protect it from misuse. At this point, the question shifted. It was no longer what is the mask, but why reveal it now? Why did the scan succeed where others failed? Some suggested coincidence, others pointed to recent advances. But a few insiders whispered something more unsettling, that the observation threshold had finally been met, that the mask was built to wait until humanity reached a specific level of capability before responding. This would explain the adaptive behavior, the probability shifts, the resonance, the refusal to resolve under scrutiny. The artifact was not dormant, it was selective. One technician reportedly asked whether the mask could distinguish between observers. The question was never answered. Instead, the room was cleared, the session terminated, and the technician reassigned indefinitely. Since then, a quiet directive has circulated. No further scans using methods that involve probabilistic interaction. No modeling that treats the object as active. The official stance is preservation. The unofficial stance is avoidance. Because if the mask was designed to bridge something, then completing that bridge might have consequences no one is prepared to manage. And if ancient builders encoded safeguards against premature access, then bypassing them could trigger outcomes beyond academic embarrassment. The data exists. Fragmented. Controlled. Watched. Those who have seen enough insist the truth is no longer speculative. The mask is not a relic of belief. It is a component of a larger framework, one that challenges not just history but agency itself. The scan did not uncover a secret message. It revealed a function. And once a function is understood, it can be misused. That is the fear driving the silence. Not that the past will change, but that the future might. Because if this object was meant to endure until the right moment, then the real question is no longer what it does. The question is whether activating it was ever supposed to be a choice,